Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what's new, what's next, and what matters in Metro Detroit from our studio in Techtown. I am Jer Stays, and joining me as he does every Friday, Mr. Devin O'Reilly. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Jer. Is Trump done speaking?
So we were going to record this. We were going to do this thing with a reaction to the speech. And as we are recording this, he is nearing 2 hours that he has gone on. He got on stage, I believe, late, and then it's 2 hours. At some point, we just had to say, forget it, we're going to rock and roll.
So full disclosure, I messaged you earlier this week. I thought about going to this. I'm a member of the DEC. I considered going to this for the fanfare, for like just the curiosity that exists within me. And I am so glad that I didn't, because I ain't got time for this. S-H-I-T.
Okay, let's set aside the policies, which I don't think I could really discern too much out of it. This was a dystopian stand-up show. Like, I don't understand why this is entertaining. I feel terrible for the national and political press corps that feel like they have to cover this all the time, because there is no okay, everyone tells me that this man is some sort of entertainer, and I remember The Apprentice. I remember all this stuff. What is this?
It wasn't entertaining. I think I've heard this in other places. Like the analogy is like he's lost his fastball. Like he's not even the bombastic, loud, boisterous, but somewhat charming person, charismatic person he was in like 2016, 17. I watched some of the live stream. Thank God I just did it on live stream. He was slow and tired and not really getting his words out well. It's very ironic what's transpired with the previous Democratic candidate, because
I did hear him reminisce that, they swapped out Joe Biden. He was there were so many grievances.
But almost all the analogies, he's been incoherent. I listened to some of it. Here's what I thought, Jerry. I thought the reason I listened to more than an hour. I would never go to a rally, obviously, or maybe that's not obvious to people. I would never go to a rally, but I was interested because this is the Detroit Economic Club audience, and so I thought that there would be some kind of at least concepts of a plan, as he likes to say, and not his usual just drivel. It was just incoherent rambling. He called Detroit a third world country at one point, so he's just crapping on the city that he's in. I don't know what that's going to do for him. He was just trashing Shawn Fain and the UAW. He was trashing every politician in Michigan. He almost had like a Tourette's with the word tariffs. He would not stop yelling out tariffs as if that was like the magical solution to everything. And the people in the audience know better. They know better because they're executives, they're CEOs, they run companies. They know that tariffs aren't going to work. They're not going to solve anything because...
So let's explain why, though. Because I think a lot of people have bought into the idea that tariffs are this golden ticket.
It's like a hand behind your back. It forces products and things to be made here because it raises the cost so much on importing and getting things from other countries, which is okay in some sense. But tariffs aren't like all bad, but they're not an economic development tool as a kind of catch-all for certainly lowering inflation. My God, Jared, do you know what one thing that is definitely going to happen with tariffs is the cost of goods is going to go up immediately. It will spike. So we talk about inflation, talk about bringing the price of goods down. I can tell you, and I'm not even an economist, bring any economist on here, the first thing that will happen with tariffs is the price of goods will go right up. I mean, so what are we doing here? It wasn't the whole thing to bring down costs and lower inflation?
Well, it's a tool that is like wood, right? Like you can use it to either hit somebody with it like a violent attack, or you could use it to build a house. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that those prices all get passed on to consumers.
Right.
And there are things that are legitimate. Like we need to talk about, foreign automakers. We need to talk about how to deal with EVs. And we've wrestled a little bit with this on the show, but like this is a very simplified language to a complex problem.
And we've talked about, we don't need to get into this on this show. Certainly, you've talked about it elsewhere. We agree we need to build more here. We absolutely need to build more here, including doubling down on the EV industry and building EVs.
Half of Michiganders don't agree with you, though.
But Trump hates EVs, so he doesn't want to build EVs here. So when he talks in these grandiose terms about we're going to bring all the jobs back here, he didn't give a iota of evidence of what jobs he's even talking about. So it was just incoherent. And I tried to be very pragmatic about, all right, what is he going to say if I was listening as as someone, just John Q voter in Michigan? It was just drivel. It didn't make any sense.
I think that's what gets me about all of this. And it doesn't matter which party. People who know better should not sign on to this. I get it if you don't understand economics, or I understand like to a degree some of this, but like I don't get it when you actually understand how economics works. Harris is coming to town, so we'll address that separately. But this did not seem like the sauce at all.
Yeah, sure. And in all fairness, we'll give the same deference. We'll listen to what she has to say, and we'll kind of parse through some of it. But like, you got to give us something to parse through. This was just, well, I don't know what that was. That some people are, God help them, are still listening to. But we can't dwell on this too much, Jared, because there's so much more to talk about, and he'll probably still be talking when we're done with this.
For sure. Let's talk about the new Hansens Hall, where I've been. We always like to show where we've been, what we're drinking. I'm going to start with a where we've been.
All right, let's talk about Hansens Hall.
Okay, so this is in Oak Park. It's a new place just opened within the last couple of weeks, about 2,800 square feet, capacity about 100, usually seats about 60. It is a cocktails and beer only spot on 9 Mile. It's kind of paired up with Pi-Sci, which is, they've got a new outpost out there. And I wrote a piece in our newsletter talking about it because I had a wonderful time out there. Me and the lady did a little bit of a jaunt between Royal Oak, Oak Park, Ferndale, like a big biking loop.
Gotta love a good jaunt. I love a good jaunt.
It was actually excellent. The bike lanes on both 9 Mile and Woodward were actually a lot of fun. And so we biked to this place, checked it out. And you know what? The idea is that it would be the extension of somebody's living room. And if you live in that neighborhood, or heck, if you're just looking for a living room to land in, because sometimes you want to go to a stranger's living room. Why not?
I love it.
It was great. Really enjoyed it. The prices were really kind. One thing I thought, and I covered this in the newsletter that I thought was interesting. They actually made a variance in Oak Park so that they didn't have to demolish more buildings for parking. They actually did something where it's like, okay, we can reduce the parking minimums to allow for this development to happen. And it's been crucial in like keeping the urban fabric, and they have not had capacity issues. Even with the place full, so many people walk, bike, they're near there. I mean, people don't realize Oak Park as a community is smaller than greater downtown Detroit and has more residents than greater downtown Detroit.
Which is a really interesting fact, but yes, that's true.
It's more than 29,000 people over 5.5 square miles. And so like, if you think about it, like it's more dense than downtown with lots of residences right there. So it makes it work. And you got Ferndale right there. You've got Royal Oak. All those things are kind of connected communities. And when I lived up in the University District, I really, really realized how much of my time was spent in Ferndale and places like that as opposed to downtown. It's a weird thing, but when I lived in the University District, I found myself in Ferndale more than I was downtown.
Yeah, it's situated really nicely. And up until, I don't know, a number of years ago, was it like a dry city?
Yeah,
something like
only
that.
Recently, they voted that in.
Right. And so it's kind of on the cusp of maybe some cool things. Densely populated, which is always helpful. You have some dense population that helps. It's a very diverse community.
A lot of young professionals are moving in.
Makes sense. As other places get really expensive. I mean, we can talk about Royal Oak is quite an expensive community to live in right now. So
Detroit gets all of the press coverage around that, but prices have been going up in Royal Oak and Ferndale and other places.
Well, it's very cool to have a place like that in Oak Park. It sounds delightful. Love a good kind of casual hangout spot.
Could we ever trick you there?
I think you could. You could. Do you know the hours?
Oh, they open at 4 p.m. every day.
I can work with that. All right.
What have you done? Because you didn't go anywhere, but you have booze in your hand.
Well, hey, compliments of Jer and Harmonic. For those of you who maybe you've seen the videos or whatever, in the studio there is a number of bottles from our friends at Harmonic Spirits, and I always admire them. I love a good bottled spirit because I love the consistency. I love the consistency of a bottled cocktail.
You like to know what you're getting when you open this up.
I do. Full disclosure, we usually record in the AM, which I'm not ready yet to have my first nips of the brown goodness. But we're recording a little later today, and I figured, hey, now is as good a time as any to try this because I've been waiting to try this stuff. And so I helped myself to a nice little pour of the Harmonic Spirits Old Fashioned because, of course, why not?
And I'm very interested in this. This is not a sponsored segment, but this is something that I wanted to try. We're actually going to try
here.
Yeah, we're going to try all these different flavors on a different episode, but you wanted to get in there, so let's get in there. Cheers and salute, my friend.
Smooth. It's very smooth. That's why I like a bottled spirit. They always end up smoother. Not too sweet. It looks like the ingredients here are whiskey, turbinado sugar, which I don't know what turbinado sugar is, but it seems like a good sugar, and radiant bitters, which I definitely appears.
I'm shining.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a whiskey drinker. I could just drink this as just a neat. I'm sure it would taste even better over ice. So count me in. I love it, and it drinks. It's a cocktail. It's 40% alcohol, so it's a true cocktail. It's true old fashioned.
This serves a need because I can't tell you, friends, how many times I have been to events with awful booze. Have not we been to events together where we have sat there drinking watered down plastic cups full of trash?
And the old fashioned is not well done. It is often
ordered and often offered, but also often awful.
There's a lot of there, Jed. My alliterations were escaping me, but yes, it is oft ordered. It is oft available, but it is oftentimes poorly done. Yes, and awful. This is smooth, consistent. It's a great way to save yourself money. I mean, look, I don't know what's the milliliters on here. 750 milliliters. So you're going to pour yourself probably at least 10 dozen drinks out of this, and what would that cost you to go to a cocktail bar? And it's the same quality.
I think engineer Randy and then drinks expert Mickey Lyons will be coming on the show to talk about all the different flavors. But you just had to get into the stash, man. I appreciate that.
Had to get in the old fashioned because I love a good bottled batched old fashioned, and this definitely stood up to my very discerning tastes.
You know who's having a drink right now? Probably, if they drink. I don't know if they drink. Gretchen Whitmer. Actually, we know they drink. I read her book.
Gretchen's having a drink.
The reason why she's having a drink is apparently she is in talks with Stellantis because we may lose them. Like, Cranes framed it a different way. Cranes framed it as Whitmer in talks with Stellantis CEO to keep HQ in Michigan. I will link to it in the show notes. But that means that this is on the table, that we could lose what is some people call the Detroit 3, but we've had that discussion.
We've had that discussion. To me, it's the 2.5. So,
but economically, this is important.
Yes, and that's what it is. Taking off my snarkiness, where I would say, hey, you contribute the least to the big three anyway. The truth is, it is a huge economic impact. It's thousands of jobs. It's just important from a pride perspective to have these major autos headquartered in the Detroit area. So we don't want to lose Stellantis. I don't think we don't have a lot of details about where would they go? What would their plan be?
I think they're shopping for the best deal possible because they're in so much economic, trouble.
Yeah, perhaps it's just a money play. I do know we can pontificate a little bit here and say that Michigan is a pretty low barrier to do business type of state. So, certainly they could get incentives from other places, but it's not like they're moving out of California or Texas or New York. It's Michigan's.
They do have that large headquarters around their neck, though. That is a large piece of property that I don't know has a real purpose. And you look at the General Motors headquarters, you got the same. You know what? Could we get the trifecta? Could we get the trifecta of Ford, then GM, then Stellantis or Chrysler in there into the rents? And that would be hilarious.
Let's start that here. I love that because you're absolutely right in the sense of the big albatross around their neck is that massive, massive space in Auburn Hills, which, no offense to Auburn Hills, is basically become just a giant business park. That's what it is. The tax base is it's a giant business park.
Well, and let's remember Auburn Hills poached Chrysler from Highland Park, decimating Highland Park.
So having said that, it is kind of an albatross. I'm sure it's expensive. I'm sure workers there are like, I don't want to work in this giant office park. I'd like to work somewhere a little more exciting. Who might have space?
Well, Auburn Hills has seen so much development, though, and I don't want to slag on Auburn Hills. We've got listeners out there, and they, have found that they, you see new apartments popping up out there. A whole bunch of things are happening in that Oakland County area because, honestly, Oakland County is really business friendly. So, but Chrysler is kind of the center of it. If you think about the spirit of Auburn Hills, you lose the Palace, you lose the Stellantis North American headquarters. I know there's other things there.
If nothing else, Jared, fine, take that all away. They would probably want to downsize, right? They want to lower their footprint. God knows how many square feet that headquarters is, but they could probably be using half of that. You know what I mean? So let's agree. At least say
it's a different world now because they're sharing platforms. There isn't as much R&D. It's not like GM where they're doing so much at that tech center.
So I guess what I'm trying to kind of speculate out is to say that the negotiations with Whitmer and Stellantis are more so. Okay, we know you want to leave your headquarters. So you want to actually physically leave the building you're currently in and downsize. please, can we stay in Michigan and let's find you a development, let's find you a space that you can perhaps downsize. That's where I'm going. But okay, if you want to stay in Oakland County.
What if they take over all the rest of what they call the Chrysler House? I think they have 2 floors now.
No, I think this would be my dream scenario, right? I mean, they stay here, they downsize. It's the nature of remote work means that less people have to go to the office, obviously, anyway. So yeah, man, come on downtown to Stellantis.
You've only had like 1 sip of this stuff.
Come on downtown, Stellantis. I was only missing, half a word there.
I would love to hear what people think. DailyDetroit@gmail.com. Speaking of sips, the Post Bar looks like it's returning to downtown Detroit over on Broadway in that strip there. It's kind of near the Y and where Punch Bowl Social was.
The one mic,
and all that kind of stuff. We have a listener who actually was a bouncer at the old Post Bar and had a wedding reception at the old Post Bar. And so like there's a lot of people with a lot of good remembrances of the elephant themed bar with usually a dance floor and a lot of tomfoolery.
I think we have to level set here. Where was the original Post Bar? I'll make sure I'm correct here.
So in Detroit anyway, I remember it being right there by what's now Huntington Place.
Yes.
Tucked away there in that weird little strip and that weird, it was a weird one,
it was a long time ago.
But people loved it.
Yeah. So I remember there was Kobo Joe's and there was Post Bar.
Back when the Joe Louis Arena was a hopping
those 2
thing,
bars were like where you went before Wings games,
Anchor
where
Bar.
you went before Anchor Bar.
Oh man, Anchor took a real hit with those.
So I wanted to remind myself because I can't say I was a huge Post frequenter back in the day because it just was kind of out of the way.
Was it almost like, was it Speak Time a little bit before you?
It was. It was like early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s was just before I was getting into the scene. But it's great to have back. You know, I was a frequenter of, it was the Post Dearborn. My gosh, did I spend a night or 100 at the Post in Dearborn. So those were great times, live music and such. That's development has taken that. But I've been to the Post Dearborn. I've been to the Post in Plymouth several times. And I've been to the Post in Novi actually a lot back in the day.
Back in the day, the Post near Grosse Pointe, it was in Detroit.
I didn't realize there was a Grosse Pointe one.
Oh, yeah. Well, not officially, because here's the deal. Back then, Grosse Pointe, you could not have a dance floor. I don't think you still can. And so the Post Bar in Grosse Pointe was a big deal, or in Detroit, just on the other side of Mac, because you could have a dance floor. Because, we can't do the dancing on the east side. It's terrible things happening. Sinning, and tomfoolery can happen with a dance floor. One thing I will say is, according to this article in the Detroit Free Press, which I will link to, the original sign is coming out of storage, and I am all for an original sign.
That I really, really like. Suffice to say, I'm really excited for this, Jer. Excited to go. Again, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, the days of dancing the night away are well past me at this point. But the Post Bar was always good for, lunches and quick dinners and happy hours, and so for that, I will be very excited.
What is the age that day drinking comes into more force, do you think, in general? Because I
30?
find in my mid-40s, I'm definitely much more of a day drinker.
I would say 30 is when it starts. 35 is when it really kicks in. And if you become a father, then that immediately kind of accelerates it to that point.
Would love to hear what you think. DailyDetroit@gmail.com. All right. According to historicdetroit.org, there is progress over at the long vacant Lee Plaza building. The Roxbury Group, they've done a number of projects, the Metropolitan, the David Whitney. They've got a great track record, to be honest, with these historical places. The Lee is going to be lower income and market rate apartments, and the first phase is expected to take about 2 years, according to reports. Now, this one, I remember when producer Cheyenne walked the stairs to the roof and sent pictures and was so excited because this building has a lot of history. It's also in kind of like an off the map, not off the map, but off the beaten path kind of way, being tucked away down West Grand Boulevard, but has so much history. For a long time, it was kind of the premier hotel that allowed African Americans to stay. There's just a lot with this. It's a beautiful building. I'm glad to see this actually happening because there's been so much like starts and fits and whatever.
It's a big project. I mean, it's huge. You look at the building; it kind of stands out on its own because it's the only thing over a few stories over in that area. So it just like sticks out like a sore thumb, frankly, as you're driving on the freeways and stuff. But it's great to see it. It's going to be, like you said, low income and market rate, truly low income and market rate. So this is not one of those trying to build luxury apartments type of thing at all. But it is also in an area where it is out of the way now. But there's so much going on. You think about the development that's happening with, Henry Ford and the Pistons and Michigan State and all that. That's going to kind of creep towards that area off on the Boulevard.
I could bike to the studio from here.
The Motown Museum is getting that massive expansion. That's a couple blocks away from Lee Plaza. So there is some things that are happening that are starting to get close to Lee Plaza that could kind of connect all that.
Can I make you groan but make our transit nerds happy?
Okay.
What if we did some sort of Grand Boulevard line?
Oh,
I think that could be so great.
I like that. Well, you're being reasonable, Jerry. I'm okay with that.
As a kid who grew up with buses and the D-Dot buses, and I would go ahead and take the Jefferson to the Grand Boulevard because my dad would always need to mail stuff. And he liked to mail things out of the basement of the Fisher Building where there was a post office. Mm-hmm. So we would take the Jefferson to the Grand Belt. The Grand Belt would take us by the Fisher Building. And so I feel like there's a lot of potential with the growth of Grand Boulevard, so many things. You could connect Southwest Detroit. And I know there's like a bus line, but we could do more. Yeah, I want a big old loop. And I want to be able to easily get to Belle Isle. I want to be able to easily get to these places.
I like that a lot because you're right. You do a really nice loop. And essentially you are connecting everything
almost from Indian Village.
Everything from Belle Isle all the way to Southwest Detroit. That's really cool. And you get Michigan Avenue node in there.
And it's mostly a boulevard, so you got space to work.
All right, Jer. Cosign.
Really?
Oh yeah,
I am stunned. Look at Devin.
No, you shouldn't be. I mean, I want this. I want it on Michigan Avenue. I want it on Jefferson, and let's throw the Boulevard in there too.
This one is closer to your neck of the woods, and I want to talk about it because we don't have a ton of details. But the old Dearborn Hyatt has been purchased for nearly $6 million. Now we don't have details as we are recording this on who bought it, that kind of thing. But I want to talk about the potential here in Dearborn because there are some things happening. You've got all the stuff that's been happening in West Dearborn. We talked about the Peace Park. You've got stuff with the food hall that is coming together. You've got Fairlane in transition. So
the Midtown Food Hall. You have a secondary food hall, the old Andiamo space. That's going to be another kind of food hall area. So it's like you got two different areas.
Can I get like a hamster wheel, like a giant hamster ball, just to go between the food halls and eat, and then roll to the next one?
I would like to. I'm working on it. I'm going to work on that.
I think that would
be
some
kind
good.
of transportation. Yes.
Think forward. Why is it important that this maybe doesn't get flipped but gets invested in? Why could this be good for reigniting a corner of Dearborn?
Yeah, people still call it the old Hyatt property because that's what everyone knows it as, and it really didn't have much life after that.
It had a cool history too.
Yeah,
didn't it have a monorail? Was that the one?
It had a monorail from the hotel to Fairlane Mall. It had a beautiful revolving restaurant upstairs. One of the only ones that still revolved to one point. I doubt it still works anymore. And it up until even the Super Bowl that we hosted, the Seahawks, when the Seahawks played the Steelers, the Seahawks stayed at the Hyatt. It's huge. I mean, it's like the second or third biggest hotel, or would be, in the state by number of rooms.
773 rooms, apparently, 18 stories. So 18 stories is as tall as Michigan Central Station.
Yeah, this is big. So I mean, this excites me. I've seen it pass through hands of people who probably didn't have the best intentions for it, either to flip it or honestly as a tax shelter or a money laundering operation, like we saw with the Edward. I mean, there's a whole legal stuff on that. That's literally what it was. This excites me, but I'm gonna hold off my optimism until I know who purchased it, because in the nature of real estate and acquiring buildings and things like that, it may well be that the person who purchased it is looking to just kind of flip it, looking to kind of just sell the note on it, that sort of thing. Better case scenario is this person is willing to actually, or interested in actually developing the property and bringing it back to some kind of life. Now, from what I know, and I can say this on pretty good authority, I believe that if the person who purchased this, or the entity that purchased this, has those intentions, I know that the city is very desirous to bring this development back to some kind of life with people in it. Now, I'm being vague, but I can say that certainly a major flagship hotel would be probably interested in going into this space. Would it be kind of white box, ready to go, developed? As you know, hotels aren't in the business of developing things. If you're a Marriott, you're not building and developing. Someone else does that, and you come in as the hotel flag.
There's so much energy around downtown Detroit hotels. Where do you think something like a Dearborn fits in, or does its sheer size make it a player?
Both. Dearborn is it's one of the easiest suburbs to get to Detroit to and fro.
Like if you were to do a shuttle or
multiple
something like
trunk
that,
lines, freeways, surface streets. I mean, Dearborn and Detroit. I mean, Dearborn is a peninsula within Detroit. It's surrounded by Detroit on three sides. So the sheer location proximity gives it a lot of advantages. There's the reason why it was built in the first place. It wasn't to serve the Dearborn population. It served a lot of the Detroit people coming downtown. So I think it has huge potential in that regard. And what do we talk about all the time? We need more hotel rooms. We need thousands of more hotel rooms. And so the demand is 100% there.
Sorry if you hear sirens in the background. We actually have a fire station literally on the other end of the block.
Yeah, I mean, I think it adds some fun.
I just know some listeners get a little bit like weirded out if they hear sirens while they're driving. So I want to make sure that they know that those are not sirens behind you. They are sirens behind us.
It was signifying a hot take.
There you go.
There's a hot take going on.
Another thing people don't realize is that one, there's a lot of people who travel full forward, but the biggest travel destination in Metro Detroit is actually Greenfield Village in the Henry Ford. That is the number one reason people come as far as like places to go in the entire region. Not talking about conventions or whatever. If you're coming, that's the number one tourist attraction. People do not realize that, but it's our biggest card.
Over 1 million visitors a year.
Far larger, I think significantly larger than the DIA.
Yeah, it's by and large the tourist destination gets the most visitors in any given year. So that would also certainly serve a purpose there. People who stay at Greenfield Village or go to Greenfield Village stay all over. Dearborn has had a lot of hotels pop up.
It's a theme park for nerds. Let's be honest. I love Henry Ford. I love going.
So to say that there's these smaller hotels that have popped up. Just not to get too into the weeds, but I obviously live this and I drive past them. Like these comfort suites and Trowbridge suites and like all these like smaller hotel concepts that have popped up in Dearborn that have built up, and that's great. But a hotel like this would be able to serve that population directly.
And didn't they recently redo the historic hotel that's right near there?
They're still working on the Dearborn end.
They're still working on the Dearborn end.
That's owned by Ford Land.
I know we had a listener that like worked there or something that sent me a note.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a future episode, Jared. I'm all over that, but they're doing a lot. I think they're doing a very meticulous restoration of that hotel, which I'll be excited when it actually comes to fruition.
It feels like Devin O'Reilly is the king of meticulous restorations. You've told us about a few of them.
I mean, some of our friends like Mickey Lyons and Dan Austin would disagree that they are probably more of the kings of meticulous restoration, but I'm just a fan.
But by the way, if you are watching this on video, look over my shoulder. There is a gift from none other than Mickey Lyons of a Detrola radio, because Detrola was a radio brand built in Detroit, among the many other things. Also in the studio is a duck decoy, because did you know that Detroit was the number one supplier of duck decoys before World War II?
What do we do with duck decoys?
We hunt ducks.
You put the duck in the duck in the water, and then another duck comes to go say hello to the duck?
Yeah.
And then some lonely ducks.
I mean,
I see ducks travel together, Jer. I don't understand this concept.
So as much as I'm not a hunter, they're hand painted.
Okay, that part.
They're hand painted and carved, so that's beautiful. There was actually different levels of duck.
They're better as decor than hunting ducks with.
I agree. As a fan of, everyone.
As a fan of ducks?
As a fan of ducks, there is no doubt. And also pheasants, as some people will know. There is a pheasant in the studio.
Still staring at you.
He's staring at, well, he's always going to stare at you because he loves you. As do our listeners.
Cheers, my friend.
With that, thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit this week. Thank you to Cheyenne Nocerini for editing these episodes and making us sound a little bit more coherent. I really appreciate you. Thank you to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/Daily Detroit. The fun continues with our member-only Discord chat, which we are all in. And a reminder, next week, October 17th on a Thursday, the congregation, be there, be square, starting at 4, running till about 7 p.m. Because you know what? I love to meet listeners. I love to hang out. We've got our listeners, our readers of our newsletter. I'm always so glad. That's the thing. Celebrating more than 1,500 episodes. It's the community that I appreciate the most.
Absolutely, Jared. And maybe we can get Shy to edit that Donald Trump speech down once, Since she's so good at making people coherent.
Going? Oh, no, and it's just over. It's just over.
At making people coherent. I would love to hear her touch with that,
The final runtime, now this isn't, I think there was some time beforehand, but the final runtime on that video is more than 2 hours.
I've heard enough.
And people have heard enough of your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Devin O'Reilly.
Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around town.